This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
Okay, good morning everyone. We're going to start with one little Iyun on Daf Ayin Amud Aleph regarding a RL eating Teruma. The Mishnah said in the beginning of the parak, in the beginning of parak HaRL, that HaRL v'chal tmeim lo yochel b'Teruma. An RL or anyone who's tamei cannot eat Teruma. Rashi says, what's the case of an RL who can't eat Teruma? Can any RL eat Teruma? Is any RL allowed to eat Teruma? Says Rashi, Kohen shemesu achiv machmas Milah. We're talking about a Kohen, even if his brothers died because of Milah, he cannot eat Teruma. So Rashi's of the opinion, not Stama Apikoires, who doesn't do the mitzvah of Milah, but any RL cannot eat Teruma. If you look in Tosfos, Tosfos quotes Rashi. Tosfos says, "Perish b'kontris, shemesu achav machmas Milah." V'chein nira, says Tosfos, it would seem that even someone whose brothers died because of Milah cannot eat Teruma. Why? Because this is something that requires some analysis over here. If somebody didn't do Milah because his brothers died because of Milah, his life is in jeopardy. It's pikuach nefashos. He's not allowed to do Milah. And even so, he can't eat Teruma. And Tosfos says something very interesting. Tosfos quotes the Gemara that we're going to learn later today. The Gemara has a shaila about a kid who is, let's say, 5 days old, 4 days old, so he didn't have a Milah yet, he's an RL. And obviously you're not going to feed him Teruma, he's not able to eat yet, but you want to anoint him with Teruma, the oil of Teruma. And there's a drasha that anointing is like eating. So Gemara has a shaila whether a kid who has not yet reached 8 days is allowed to be anointed with the oil of Teruma. Now, the kid is an RL. And yet, even though the kid's an RL because he can't do Milah. The 8th day didn't come. And even though he can't do Milah, the Gemara has it tzad, maybe he's not allowed to be anointed with the oil of Teruma. So what Tosfos seems to be bothered by is, why would the Gemara have it tzad that a kid who's 8 days old could be anointed with the oil of Teruma, but the Mishnah holds that an RL whose brothers died because of Milah cannot eat Teruma. So if an RL whose brothers died because of Milah is like somebody who the Yom HaMilah has not come for. He's pater from Milah. Just like a kid who's not 8 days old is pater from Milah. So why don't we say, just like in the Mishnah he can't eat Teruma, so too the kid should not be allowed to have the oil of Teruma smeared on him. So that's
there's a chiluk between having a patur and there's no chiv to begin with until he's 8 days old.
So Tosfos wants to make a chiluk, like Rabasi is saying. Tosfos says that the cases are not parallel. Tosfos says, "Deloi dami la'arla shaloi mizmana." A kid, someone whose brothers died because of Milah, is not like an arla shaloi mizmana. To me, boilan begamara. The Gemara we're going to see soon. Ye have a arla if it's an arla. Dahasam ki yoytze have a bar milah. There, anyone in that situation is not a bar chiyuva for milah b'shum makom under any circumstance, because this man hasn't come yet. Aval achar ches, but after 8 days, afagav di'i efshaloi lamo, even though he can't do milah l'mnei hasakana, have a oral kivan shigi hazman. So basically, Tosfos defends Rashi. Rashi is of the opinion that even an RL whose brothers died because of Milah cannot eat Teruma. The Gemara says that perhaps a kid before 8 days could partake of Teruma, and Tosfos makes a chiluk that before 8 days old there's no chiyuv in Milah. But once there's a chiyuv, even though there's a p'tur, then you cannot partake of Teruma. That's the shita of Rashi. Tosfos seems to defend it. If you look in the Tosfos Yeshanim, which should be on the left-hand side in your Gemara, the Tosfos Yeshanim quotes the shita of Rabbeinu Tam. He says, "Perish hakuntris b'chal makom arel shamesu achiv machmas Milah." V'loi nira, says Tosfos Yeshanim, "Dim kein ena mitzvah lamulai." Tosfos says that it would not seem that someone whose brother died because of Milah is considered an Arel, because if so, they're not Mitzuva in Milah. Perosh lamol es atzmai lefi shehu anos. Tosfos says if someone's brothers died because of Milah, they're not obligated to mal themselves. They're in oinus. They can't. It's pikuach nefashos. V'have kamayu Milah shaloi bizmana. It's like Milah shaloi bizmana. V'kasha the Gemara boy arel katan mahu l'seichen shemen shel truma. Arelo shaloi bizmana ma'akva eloi ma'akva v'amai eloi pashim mas nisan dikiven the marish shemeisach machz Milah im keinen asu v'kiven shenenas arelo shaloi bizmanahu. The Tosfos Yishanim says that the case of smearing a baby before 8 days with the oil of Truma is precisely analogous to someone whose brothers died because of Milah. What would the difference be between someone whose brothers died because of Milah and someone who is not 8 days old? In the same way, someone who's not 8 days old, there's a tzad they could partake of Truma. Someone whose brothers died because of Milah also should be able to partake of Truma. And therefore, the Tosfos Yishanim quotes Rabbeinu Tam that argues on Rashi, L'chein perish Rabbeinu Tam, the Arel Ratzalomer Meshumad La'arelos. He is Meshumad. In other words, he's not bikaris. He doesn't believe in Arelos. Actually, other Rishonim, I believe the Rashba says, he's not a Meshumad La'arelos, because as we're going to see, the Gemara later on calls someone who didn't have a Milah, Liboy L'Shamayim. He's still a loyal Jew. Now, if he's a Meshumad, he would not seem to be a loyal Jew. It could be he's just scared. He's scared of Milah. It's a surgical procedure. He's not an Apikaris. He's just afraid. Either way, there's a Machlokes, Rashi and Rabbeinu Tam. Rashi learns the case of an Arel is even someone whose brothers died because of Milah. But before the 8th day, the halacha is that they're not chayiv in, they are considered a roi for Truma. That's before the 8th day. Once the 8th day comes, even though there's pikuach nefashos and you're an oinus, nevertheless, you're considered an Arel. Masha'in Kain, the opinion of Rabbeinu Tam is that he holds the same way before the 8th day you're not chayiv in Milah. If someone is meso echa machmas Milah, you're also not chayiv in Milah. So just to be masber this machlokes, Rabbeinu Tam and Rashi, it would seem that they're arguing on the extent of a p'tur of oinus. How do we view someone who's oinus? Do we view someone who's oinus that really they're chayiv in the mitzvah, but they have an extenuating circumstance that exempts them? Or does the oinus sort of get even more fundamental than that, and it almost makes it like the zman for Milah has not come? Exactly how basic is the p'tur of oinus? So I just want to show you one paragraph in the Kavetz Haaretz in Rabbi Chanan, and just to be masber this machlokes, hopefully this will come up. Here we go. Okay, could you see that? The Rabbi Chanan in Simem Tes, if Katan Yu Tes, he brings of Chidushe Harashba Reish Parak Ha'arel Hevi B'Shem Rabbeinu Tam the Arel Shemeso Achav Machmas Milah Hava Ka'arelo Shaloi Bizmana. The Rashba quotes Rabbeinu Tam that an Arel whose brothers died because of Milah is like an Arel Shaloi Bizmana Umoter Lacha B'Truma. Now why would that be? Well, Lefi Devarav, according to Rabbeinu Tam, Al Karchel Tzarech Loimar, you have to say that the same way there's no mitzvah of Milah on a kid who's 5 days old, there's no mitzvah of Milah b'makam pikuach nefashos. Ve'enod kamay anos. In other words, someone whose brothers died because of Milah is not an oinus. Pikuach nefashos is different than an extenuating circumstance. Pikuach, in other words, haga ba'atzmecha. What would you say about the following case? A kid is 8 days old, a guy is 8 days old, and he lives in a city that doesn't have a knife. Is he allowed to eat truma, or is he not allowed to eat truma? Avada, he cannot eat truma. But it's not his fault. So we say, you're right, it's not your fault. but you're chayiv in Milah, and you didn't do it. Yeah, but why are you penalizing me? So we're not penalizing you. Only an RL cannot eat Truma. You're an RL. Yeah, but it's not my fault. Okay. It's not a Yisrael's fault that he's not a Kohen, but he can't eat Truma either. So it's not your fault that you didn't have a Milah. So everybody agrees that an Oines, an Anos, cannot eat Truma. So why is someone whose brothers died because of Milah allowed to eat Truma? It must be, Rabbeinu Tam is of the opinion that Pikuach Nefashos is different than an Anos. Pikuach Nefashos makes it that there's no mitzvah at all. But Tosfos argues, and Rashi argues, and Tosfos feels that there's a big difference between Milah Shalai Bizmana and Pikuach Nefashos. Ve'efshir shezeh ta machlekusan. This is a machlokes. Rashi is of the opinion that if someone who Pikuach Nefashos is like an Anos, and the Rabbeinu Tam is of the opinion it's not like an Anos. You're not mechuyev in the mitzvah at all. So this is sort of a very a shas machlokes. How do we view the status of someone who is in a makam of Pikuach Nefashos? Rabbeinu Tam says that if somebody were to be meso achav machmas Milah, they would not. They would not be able. They would be able to eat Truma. Rabbeinu Tam is the opinion that if somebody, if their brothers died because of Milah, they would be able to eat Truma. Rashi holds no, they would not be able to eat Truma. It's just like an Anos, but it's not that you're not chayiv in the first place. It's different than Milah Shalai Bizmana. Okay, so that's our point on Daf Ayin, and with your permission, we're going to try to do Ayin Aleph Amud Aleph.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.